All right, so our last module, number 5, we're going to talk about mulching our plants and just watering them in with a nice drink if there's no rain coming. So we've got a couple different mulch options here. Plant-based mulch is what I like. This is straw. So straw is the leftover plant material after you harvest grain. So after you harvest oat or wheat or rye, the standing plant material, the dry standing stalks, are what straw is made out of. I like to be cautious and go for organic straw just because I don't want to have any issue with herbicides. It's very common that grains can be dried down with an herbicide. Not always, but it's common. So I like to go for organic straw. I know 2 locations in town where you can get that. If you are interested in finding organic straw, just let me know. We'll try to get some for you. It's a really great mulch material because it's high carbon. And so it takes a while to break down. The higher the carbon level, the longer it takes for it to break down. I would caution though, there's a caveat here. This is wood chips. It's very high carbon. This is like 100 to 1, and this is like 500 to 1. Carbon to nitrogen ratio. Very high carbon. This is not something I would put on my garden soil. I put it in my pathways. I want it to be there blocking weeds, keeping my feet from getting muddy, and breaking down slowly over time, improving the soil in the pathways. I have put wood mulch on my garden beds, but it's hard not to mix in that wood chip, and then you can have some nutrient tie-up issues if you mix it into the soil. So I just avoid putting wood chips on my garden beds. I use something like the straw that's a little narrower carbon to nitrogen ratio. Straw will break down slowly over time. When you're mulching in your plants, think about not letting any of your soil be seen, right? Especially if we're just working with transplants. If we were direct seeding into the soil, especially if we were seeding small seeded plants like spinach or lettuce or carrots, we wouldn't put mulch on until after the plants had germinated, until after those seeds had germinated, because this is going to block the sunlight, which is what we want it to do, but those seeds need sunlight to germinate. Large seeded plants, or large seeded vegetables like a zucchini or a bean or a pea, you can mulch over that lightly. You still want to let some of that dapple light through, but you can mulch over it. The reason why you would do that is because you want to protect the moisture from evaporating out of your soil. You want to keep the water in place. And that's why we are mulching right now pretty heavily. One, we're keeping the UV light, the sunlight, from oxidizing the soil, but we're also preventing moisture, water, from evaporating out of the soil. And another major reason why we mulch heavily is to prevent weed seed germination. So just like a spinach or a lettuce or a carrot, weed seeds, small seeded weed seeds, need to have sunlight to germinate. And so if you're blocking the sun, they can't germinate. So that's one major reason you want to really pack on the mulch. And what I'm doing here is I'm applying it thick enough to where I can't see the soil, but I've got just enough space, right around that baby plant where I'm not crushing the plant or damaging the plant, tucking that mulch up, right up against that small plant. Lift the leaves, tuck it up against the plant. Go, at least 2 inches deep, but maybe that's going to be 3 inches deep, depending on the type of mulch you use. Straw is very lofty, kind of floats, makes like, I can't remember what those sticks are called, the toy sticks, but it kind of makes a little matrix. It's pretty lofty. So you want to go pretty thick with it in order to block the light. So we're going to use 3 different kinds of mulch here just for example. So you know that just about anything can be used if it's a plant-based material. Even your lawn clipping can be used, but do know fresh lawn clippings are high in nitrogen, so that carbon to nitrogen ratio is very narrow. And so you could have a bit of a, you know, a bit of a flush with your grass clippings. So don't put them on too thick. If you do use grass clippings, mix them with another high carbon mulch material like straw, like oak leaves, or like pine needles. So here we have some fall leaves. These make great mulch. Don't throw them away. They're awesome. Save them so you have them for your garden next season. Think ahead. So in the fall when you're raking your leaves, go ahead and pack them in your waste management bag, but save them. Use them for your garden. They're a great carbon-rich mulch. They take a little while to break down. They really block the sun very nicely, and they're very nutritious. They have a lot of minerals and elements in them, a lot of tannin too. That's something to consider, but I've never seen an issue with the tannin in my garden. Think about what resources you have on hand. You can use your old weedy material. You can use compost that's not fully broken down into that soil type of compost. Like the compost we're giving you is fully broken down. It looks like soil. But if your compost still looks like plant material, if you feel comfortable using it as a mulch, it can be a really nice mulch. One thing to consider though is, does your compost contain weeds that went to seed? And so just be mindful of that you're not planting weed seeds with your mulch. And if you do, that's, you know, it's not a huge deal, provided that your mulch is thick enough, you can eliminate those weeds pretty easily. I like the pine needle. It really tucks up against a plant so nicely, and it tends to be pretty protective against slugs, but honestly, it depends on the season. We're having a dry start to our gardening season this year, so we don't have a lot of slugs, but you can never count on that. In a humid environment, slugs are just going to be a part of it, just the way it is. So we're going nice and deep. Can't see the soil, tucked right up against the plant. It's going to be a very colorful bed. And I'm just going to leave my board right here as my stepping platform. I'm going to mulch around it like it's a plant. All right, you didn't see this. I snuck in some beans, so I'm mulching right around the beans. I also snuck in some spinach. We got 5 extra spinach in this bed and 4 beans in between the tomatoes. These spinaches get lost in the straw. Gotta be careful of that. I also love to take the bagged leaves, fall leaves, and I throw them out on the grass, on the lawn, and run over them with my bagged mower. And then it breaks them up into really small pieces. And I just take the bag of the mower with a little grass, a little of that high nitrogen, and the oak leaves. That makes a wonderful mulch. All right, so we're pretty well mulched here. I can do some kind of nip and tuck and all that, but first we're just gonna do a little watering and then we'll close this off as our last module, just so you have an idea of the whole process. It's nice to have a watering end like this that has a nice distributed flow. I am hitting the tomatoes right now with water. I will say in the future, if your soil is bare, be real careful not to bounce soil up off the ground onto your tomatoes. That can be a vector for the blight issues. But if you've got a nice deep mulch, I wouldn't worry about it. And if we're not dealing with a really wet season, which so far we're not, it seems like we're kind of going into a pretty dry season, you don't have to worry so much about not getting the leaves wet. Airborne fungal organisms, which cause a lot of the blight issues, can be promoted with the wet leaves, especially in the evening like it is now. But we're gonna be fine. We've got a nice mulch layer. These guys are nice and healthy. We just gave them lots of good food. So as I'm watering here, all of that compost, I'm in essence making a compost extract with this watering wand because I'm letting it percolate through the straw and the mulch down onto that compost, and it is percolating those microbes and that soluble nutrient down into the root system of the plant. All right, so that's it. They're nice and watered in, all tucked in with their mulch. That water is going to be maintained in the soil because we've got a nice mulch layer. The sun will not touch the soil. We won't get weed seeds germinating. I think we did a good job. All right, so that was our soil prep all the way to transplant and tucked in. 5 modules. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back with more educational material in the very near future. Happy growing.